Gucci Mane is one of the most influential figures in hip-hop, but there's a persistent theory that the man we see today isn't actually him. The story suggests the original rapper vanished during a prison stint and was replaced by a surgically altered double, a clone designed to be a more manageable, polished version of the original. It sounds like a movie plot, but those pushing this theory point to a personality shift that happened almost overnight. They argue the volatile, unpredictable artist of the early 2010s was erased and replaced by someone else. The clue that started this rabbit hole was a digital explosion in 2013. If you look back at the Twitter timelines from that year, you can see the moment the old Gucci hit a breaking point. And if late-night mysteries like this are your kind of rabbit hole, like the video and subscribe to Sleepwalk Files. He launched a Scorched Earth campaign, attacking nearly every major peer in the industry. He went on a public rampage, coming for Nicki Minaj, T.I., Waka Flocka Flame, French Montana, and Birdman. He even kicked Waka Flocka out of Brick Squad, claiming betrayal. He typed with a frantic energy, as if he had something to prove or someone to fight, and the industry watched the timeline like a movie. It was a visible mental collapse. This instability didn't stay on the screen. Shortly after the Twitter meltdown, the chaos moved into the streets of Atlanta. Police received multiple calls about a driver acting aggressively in traffic, making other motorists uncomfortable and creating a dangerous scene. When the officers arrived, they found Gucci Mane in the middle of the confrontation. He rushed at the police, and the encounter turned violent. By the time they restrained him, they found a firearm and illegal substances in his possession. To the public, this looked like a man spiraling. To the conspiracy theorists, this was the baseline. They see this specific window of time, the public outbursts followed by the violent arrest, as the final moments of the original Gucci Mane. They believe this level of volatility was exactly why someone or some organization decided he needed to be replaced. The consequence of that arrest was a reality check from the courts. This wasn't Gucci's first brush with the law. He had already been arrested for hitting a man with a champagne bottle in a nightclub. The judge wasn't interested in excuses anymore and sentenced him to 3 years and 3 months in prison. In the official version of the story, this prison time was a turning point. The narrative is that he went inside, took accountability, cleaned up his act, and used the structured environment to regroup. He served about 2 years before being released. But when he stepped back into the spotlight, the people who knew him best noticed something was off. They saw a man who seemed fundamentally different. The official story says he found peace in a cell, but the streets started whispering that the man who walked out of those gates wasn't the same man who walked in. If the old Gucci was defined by that 2013 chaos, who was this new, calm version of the artist? And what exactly happened during those 2 years of silence? To understand where the theory starts, you have to look at the paperwork in Atlanta. Before the world started talking about clones, the legal system was looking at a pattern of violence. Gucci Mane wasn't a stranger to the courts, but one specific incident stood out to the judge. He had been arrested for striking a man with a champagne bottle in a nightclub. It was the kind of sudden explosive aggression that made the state see him as a repeat offender. By the time he stood in front of the judge again after his 2013 arrest, the court was done with excuses. They didn't see a misunderstood artist. They saw a man who needed structured incarceration to break his cycle. The judge handed down a sentence of 3 years and 3 months. This is where the timeline enters what theorists call the black box. In a legal sense, a black box is a period of time where you can't see what's happening inside. Like the flight recorder on a plane, you know when it goes in and you know when it comes out. But the middle is a mystery. For Gucci Mane, this black box lasted approximately 2 years. He was removed from the public eye, stripped of his social media, and locked away from the streets. For 2 years, there were no new videos, no spontaneous Twitter meltdowns, and no one to verify his day-to-day existence outside of official prison rosters. The official story is simple. He went in as a volatile rapper and used that time to find peace and accountability. He cleaned up his act in a cell, and decided to turn his life around. But for those who don't buy the official version, these 2 years are the perfect window for a swap. If you wanted to replace a human being, you wouldn't do it in the middle of a concert or a press conference. You'd do it in a place where the subject is already owned by the state, where their movements are controlled, and where no one is allowed to visit without supervision. Think about the logistics of a clone or a double. You need a period of total isolation to perform the surgery, to train the replacement in the voice, and to iron out the mannerisms. 2 years of state-mandated silence provides exactly that. The original Gucci Mane was too chaotic to control, too unpredictable for the industry or the powers that be. The black box is where that problem gets solved. You take the original out and put a polished, manageable version back in. When he finally walked out of those gates, he seemed to have had his entire personality rewritten. The world saw a reformed citizen, but people who had known him for years saw something else. They noticed the way he looked and spoke had shifted in a way that felt artificial. They started asking if the man who returned from the black box was actually the man who entered it. The person who came out was a replacement. It means the original Gucci Mane never actually left that facility. It means the 2 years of rehabilitation were a cover for a permanent disappearance. Which leads to a question: if the swap happened inside the system, who was actually running the operation? In 2016, the prison gates opened and Gucci Mane walked back into the public eye for the first time in years. But as soon as the first photos hit the internet, the reaction was confusion. People didn't see a man who had simply served his time, they saw a brand new person. The old Gucci was a storm. He was known for chaotic Twitter meltdowns, public outbursts, and a volatile energy that felt like it could snap at any second. But the man who emerged in 2016 was calm and polished. He spoke with a level of maturity and peace that seemed impossible given the trajectory of his life just a few years prior. Even Nicki Minaj noticed the shift. She spoke about how he had evolved, calling him a different human being compared to the man she remembered from years ago. To some, this was a success story about a man finding himself in a cell. But to conspiracy theorists, this personality flip was too clean. They didn't see growth, they saw a replacement. The theory suggests that the original, unpredictable Gucci Mane was too much of a liability for the industry to handle. In this version of events, the man who walked out of prison wasn't the original, but a clone, a refurbished version designed to keep the brand alive without the legal headaches. As the footage of his return spread, the conversation moved from his personality to his physical appearance. On internet forums and in YouTube comment sections, fans started doing a digital autopsy. They began side-by-side comparisons of footage from before 2014 and footage from after 2016. They looked at the tiny details. People pointed specifically to his smile and the alignment of his teeth, claiming they looked different. They scrutinized the way he carried himself and the way he spoke, arguing that the cadence of his voice had shifted. In these circles, a different smile wasn't the result of dental work or aging, it was evidence of surgical alteration. The idea was that a clone would be a near-perfect copy, but the seams would show in the small things: the teeth, the eyes, the slight change in a facial expression. You believe a person can be replaced? You start looking for the people managing the replacement. This is why some theorists began looking at his wife, Kesha. They didn't see a supportive spouse. They saw a handler. The theory suggests she was assigned to the new Gucci to ensure he stayed on script and didn't deviate from the polished image the industry wanted. When you look at it this way, the healing journey Gucci speaks about becomes a cover story. If the original Gucci Mane is still locked away somewhere, or gone entirely, then the man we see today is essentially a living piece of corporate software, programmed to be the version of the artist that makes the most money with the least amount of risk. It turns a human story of redemption into a story of industrial manufacturing. If the industry could successfully swap out one of the most recognizable faces in hip-hop without the world noticing, it implies that the people at the top have access to technology and power that the rest of us can't even imagine. But if the physical evidence is just a matter of perspective, what happens when the people closest to him start hinting that the rumors might actually be true? Nicki Minaj is one of the few people who really knows the inner workings of the rap game, and in a public interview, she started talking about Gucci Mane's evolution. She didn't just say he grew up, she said, he's a different human being. She called him a different Gucci. On the surface, this is just how people talk about personal growth. We say someone is a new person after a divorce or a health scare. But for the people tracking the clone theory, these weren't metaphors. They heard a peer in the industry admitting that the man standing in front of her was literally a different biological entity. The logic here is simple. If you're just a version of yourself that's more mature, you're still the same human. But when Nicki used the phrase different human being, it gave theorists a piece of vocabulary to use. They started re-watching her clips, convinced she was slipping, giving us a hint about a replacement that the public wasn't supposed to notice. It turned a story about a man finding peace in prison into a story about a corporate swap. As this idea moved from rap interviews into the deeper corners of the internet, it stopped being a vague theory about clones and started getting specific names. That's when the Hopson theory emerged. This isn't about a lab-grown duplicate in a vat. The rumor suggests a more grounded, though still terrifying, kind of identity theft. The theory claims there was a man named Hopson who was selected for a project. The idea is that Hopson underwent extensive plastic surgery to mirror Gucci Mane's features so he could step into the rapper's life and career. Believers imagine a more grounded but terrifying kind of identity theft took place. This theory suggests a man named Hopson was surgically altered to step into the rapper's life. Kanye West brought this up, mentioning the buzz about Hopson being the one given the surgery to become Gucci. It's a narrative like something you'd see in a show like The Boys, where a character dies and is replaced by a lookalike to keep the brand alive. If this were true, the original Gucci Mane didn't change his personality in a cell. He was erased. It would mean the polished, business-minded man we see now is a professional actor or a double, wearing another man's face as a costume. If a stranger steps into a dead man's shoes, you can't let them wander around alone. They might slip up, forget a childhood memory, or react wrong to an old friend. This is where the focus shifted to Gucci's domestic life and his wife Kesha. To the public, they're a success story, a stable, wealthy couple, but conspiracy circles see a handler. The claim is that Kesha is a monitor. Theorists point to how tightly managed his lifestyle and social media have become. They argue she is there to ensure the double stays in character, keeping him away from people who knew the original Gucci too well and filtering everything he says to the world. In this version of the story, the stability of their marriage is about control. The wealth and the luxury are the golden cage used to keep the replacement compliant. When Gucci was asked about the secret to a happy marriage, he said both parties being loaded, meaning both being rich. To a normal listener, that's a blunt joke about money. To a theorist, it sounds like a transaction or the terms of a contract. If you're a man named Hopson who was surgically altered to be a superstar, you'd probably agree to a lot of things in exchange for a life of extreme wealth. This changes the image of their home from a sanctuary into a headquarters. Every photo, every coordinated outfit, and every public appearance becomes a calculated move by a handler to maintain the illusion. It suggests the healing journey Gucci talks about is a script written for him. If the man we see is a double being managed by a handler, it raises a question about the original. If Hopson is the one in the Gucci suits and the jewelry, where is the man who actually earned that fame? The theory suggests the original Gucci Mane didn't walk out of those prison gates in 2016. It suggests he's still in there, or somewhere else entirely, while a surgically altered stranger collects the checks. And if they could do this to one of the biggest names in Atlanta, it makes you wonder who else in the industry has been swapped out while the world wasn't looking. The music changed first. For years, Gucci Mane was the king of the underground, a loose cannon who released mixtapes at a breakneck pace. His career was a series of jagged peaks and deep valleys, defined by a raw, unpredictable energy that felt like it could boil over at any second. Then he went away for 2 years. When he returned in 2016, he arrived with a level of professional precision that felt foreign to his brand. He released the album Everybody Looking that year, which peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200. Then came the guest appearance on Ray Sremmurd's Black Beatles. That song hit number 1 on the Hot 100. For a man who had spent a decade as the avatar of East Atlanta's gritty underground, this sudden ascent to the peak of mainstream pop success felt too clean. The chaos was gone. The erratic behavior that had defined his public image was replaced by a polished corporate efficiency. To the people who had followed him since the Trap House days, the math didn't add up. They saw a man who had suddenly mastered the industry machine, and they wondered if the person operating the machine was actually Radric Davis. This shift in personality became a topic of conversation in the interviews themselves. In one exchange, the question is put directly to him. He is asked point blank if he is a clone. He doesn't get angry, and he doesn't laugh it off with a hard denial. Instead, he says that he would either support or deny those accusations. In public relations, a denial is a tool used to kill a story. An ambiguous answer is a door left slightly ajar for the theorists. This wasn't a joke or a bit of eccentric humor. They interpreted his refusal to flatly debunk the claim as a tacit admission. If you are the original person, and someone claims you were replaced by a lab-grown double, the natural human instinct is to say no. By refusing to say it, he left a void that people filled with their own suspicions. This reflects a cynical pattern in how we view fame. There's a long-standing tradition of the industry plant. The idea that a celebrity isn't a natural discovery but a manufactured product designed by a boardroom to fit a specific market need. In the most extreme version of this, you have the corporate replacement. It's a narrative seen in fiction like in the show The Boys. In that story, a superhero named Noir dies and the corporation finds a lookalike, trains him to mimic the dead man's voice and mannerisms, and slides him back into the public eye so the brand doesn't lose value. The Gucci Mane theory applies that narrative to real life. It suggests the original Radric Davis was too volatile and dangerous for the corporate partnerships and Grammy nominations that come with mainstream superstardom. The scenario asks, what if the industry decided the talent was valuable but the man was a liability? If you could replace a chaotic genius with a compliant double who looks and sounds the same, you could keep the profits while removing the risk. Under this lens, the success of Black Beatles is a triumph of engineering. The new Gucci Mane is a version of the artist that's safe for corporate sponsors, a version that can navigate a press junket without a meltdown. It turns the rapper into a product, a piece of intellectual property owned by a label rather than a human being with a history. When you look at it this way, the physical changes people pointed out, the smile, the teeth, the way he carries himself, stop being coincidences. They become the fingerprints of a process. If a company attempted a replacement, they wouldn't get it perfect on the first try. There would be slight deviations in the facial structure or the cadence of speech. These are the gaps where the theory lives. This transforms the story from a weird internet meme into a question of authenticity. We want to believe the artists we love are real, that their growth is organic and their struggles are genuine. But if a corporate entity can swap one person for another to protect a bottom line, then no one is untouchable. It suggests the face on the album cover is just a mask, and the real person is somewhere else entirely, perhaps still locked away or erased from the record. This leaves us with an image of a man who looks like Gucci Mane, talks like Gucci Mane, and makes hits like Gucci Mane, but operates with a calm that feels synthetic. If the man who walked out of prison in 2016 is a replacement, the transition was successful. The world accepted the substitute without a second thought. But the theory doesn't stop at the music or the interviews. To find the truth, you have to look at the people who were closest to him during that transition, the ones who saw the change happen in real time. Gucci Mane eventually addressed the rumors himself. He leaned into the weirdness of it. In interviews, he talked about the impossibility of the person he used to be. He admitted that he didn't grow or mature in the way a normal person does over a decade. He described a gap in his own evolution, feeling as though the man from 10 years ago and the man standing there now were two different entities. To a conspiracy theorist, that admission is the smoking gun. If a man says he didn't mature but suddenly has a completely different temperament and a refined public image, the biological explanation feels too simple. They see a psychological break as a replacement rather than healing. According to believers, the original Radric Davis was too volatile to be profitable, so the industry replaced him with a version that could actually handle a press conference. But there's another way to look at that gap. When someone hits a rock bottom, as deep as the one Gucci hit in 2013, the public breakdowns, the champagne bottles, the arrests, the recovery isn't always a slow climb. Sometimes it's a total demolition. You have to kill the old version of yourself just to survive. In this sense, the clone isn't a lab-grown human, it's a psychological survival tactic. He had to erase the avatar of the East Atlanta underground rapper to become the Grammy-nominated executive. The physical evidence of this transition is in the way he carries himself now. The old Gucci was a storm of chaos. The new Gucci is a businessman who talks about running companies and employing people. He moved from the trap house to the boardroom. For the people who still believe in the cloning theory, this shift is too clean. They point to facial recognition programs and rumors of handlers as proof that this polished identity was engineered by people with deep pockets who wanted a version of Gucci Mane that wouldn't end up back in a cell. We follow that what-if scenario to its end. The implication is chilling. It suggests the music industry views artists as software that can be patched or replaced when the original version becomes too buggy or dangerous. In that world, a healing journey is a corporate rebranding, and a change in personality is a new set of instructions given to a double. The more grounded explanation is that we're seeing the rarest thing in hip-hop, a man who actually changed. He went into prison as a cautionary tale and walked out as a mentor. The clone theory persists because we aren't used to seeing people genuinely evolve. We prefer the idea of a secret lab and a government conspiracy over the idea that a person can simply decide to stop being the monster everyone expects them to be. The paradox is that both stories end in the same place. Whether it was a biological clone or a mental rebirth, the original Gucci Mane is gone. The man who existed in 2013 no longer walks the earth. He was replaced by someone more stable, more successful, and far more controlled. It leaves us with one image. When Gucci Mane looks in the mirror, does he see a man who survived his own wreckage? Or does he see a stranger wearing his face, playing a part for the rest of us? You enjoyed this episode? Subscribe to Sleepwalk Files to stay up to date with new mysteries and long videos to fall asleep to every night.